We've seen unprecedented persecution of Christians throughout the world. Not since the first century have we seen this type of brutality. And what I wanted to convey to Nagameh and her family in coming is my support with them, not just in the past, but in the years ahead that will take for all these individuals to assimilate back into life. These are very difficult, emotional challenges that they're going to face, and I'm grateful for this wonderful facility and the attention that they're receiving. Of course, to our hosts, the Germans, for this facility and the people that are here. We have 32 government agencies in Ramstein and throughout this region. So this is a major facility for us to serve this region and throughout the world. So the Germans, the Swiss, and others, we extend our deep gratitude. I would say that the plight of these individuals is they've done it, and we have paid a price. We paid a price in a major way to bring them home. Yes, we do rejoice in this moment, and we celebrate this moment, but we also recognize that that door now is open even further for what could happen in the future to other American citizens traveling throughout the world. We've released 7 individuals with strong criminal records violating our own agreements. And I believe we need to be careful and we need to be prudent as we look forward and how we can better protect Americans without committing ourselves in ways that will cause greater threat to their security. Thank you. Look forward to answering your questions.
Congressman Kirsten from NBC News. What have you been told about the help these men are getting? And when will they be able to come home?
Well, they're getting all sorts of help, and this is, as Congressman Pittenger said, this is an incredible facility, medical help, really the entire spectrum of services that might be required for somebody, particularly my constituent. I think about a person who has spent 4.5 years, much of it in solitary confinement, re-entering into the world as a free person will take more than just a deep breath. It'll take a little bit of help, and that starts here. But it is, again, as my colleague said, it'll go on for a long time. When they come home, obviously as soon as possible. The families are here. I've traveled with the Hekmati family. They're anxious to see him, but they're really anxious to get him home to his mother, to his father, who's quite ill. And if I could just divert quickly from the question, I don't want to debate my friend, but I think there are 435 members of Congress for a reason. This was, from my point of view, was a victory for diplomacy, and I know when we live in a dangerous world, we have to negotiate with people with whom we have a lot in common, and sometimes we have to negotiate with folks that we share very little. And in this case, it's my view that the negotiations that took place were fruitful, and it does send a strong message to the rest of the world. But to me, that message is that diplomacy, talking to one another, is a far preferable avenue than what we've seen take place in the last couple of decades, and I support it and I applaud it.
I'd just like to echo those remarks. We're here as Americans, not as Republicans or Democrats, and I think we can leave our differences at the water's edge and just celebrate an incredibly joyous outcome for these prisoners and for their families. I'm very grateful that the administration and our negotiators in the State Department never lost focus, that they opened these channels of diplomacy and stuck with it until they brought these Americans home. And very soon we hope to bring them home to American soil.
I'm Ms. Reyes, CBS News. I understand you're here representing the 3 Americans that have made it back to Germany. Do any of you know anything about the 4th American who stayed behind, Mr. Khosravi?
No. We are only told that it was his choice to not leave Iran at this time.
And do you know anything else about him and his arrest?
No, I think I'll just say this, because I've worked with these members of Congress and others, and we all really have been advocates for our own constituent, or in the case of Mr. Pittenger, someone with whom he has a relationship. We've come together around those individuals, and that's what we share in common. Don't have a lot of familiarity with the other case.
A couple questions about time
So there's three questions there, and we may have some different answers because one of the questions...
We may have 9 answers.
We may, because your question's about timing. I got a message from the White House last Friday evening that I should be prepared for a phone call perhaps very early the next morning, and that at this point they couldn't disclose anything further or speculate about it. So at that point, obviously, I began to think we may be close to something. That call did come very early Saturday morning. The call was to tell me that Jason Rezaian was no longer in prison, that he had been released to the Swiss embassy, and that we were awaiting word that he was on a plane out of Iran, but he had not cleared airspace. So we spent all day Saturday and into early Sunday morning waiting for that final word. But that's sort of the sequence of events. You asked about the implementation day. And I'll just say this, in conversations, I know Congressman Kildee and I were in on some of the same conversations with the Swiss ambassador, with the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations. It was never made explicit, but I took some hope that once it became clear that Iran had complied with its requirements and that the U.S. and the Western allies were going to indeed lift sanctions, that these prisoners may have less political value at that point. In other words, as we got closer to that point, we may have an opportunity for diplomacy to do its work. And I think that's what brought us to this point.
In terms of my, I'll sort of go in the same order. I had constant discussions with the State Department and the White House on this, and over the course of the last couple of years, there have been times when we thought something might happen. There was a pretty marked change in the kind of discussions that we were having in the last 4 or 5 days. For me, starting on the day of the State of the Union, when I had conversations with people within the administration, Sarah Hekmati and her husband Rami Kurdi were my guests, and I know Ali Rezaian was Congressman Huffman's guest. So we wanted to make sure that we had a full understanding of what was happening. Obviously doing a lot of news media on this particular subject, we wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything that would harm the chances of this day actually coming to fruition. And I share Congressman Huffman's assessment. The one thing we can say about all of the ramifications, all of the elements of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, is that without that negotiation and without its results, the space for the kind of discussion that led to the freedom for these Americans might not have been created. I was very much aware of the sidebar discussions that were taking place, and we were made aware of the separate track of negotiation that coincided with the P5+1. But it never was intended, and I don't think it ever was connected in the sense that one was contingent on the other. But the fact of the matter is that absent the nuclear agreement, the kinds of discussion, the opportunity for the opening of that second channel would never have existed. And I think it's not just coincidental, but I think it's a set of developments that coincided with one another because of the proximity and because of the fact that the conversations were taking place.
I don't think there's any coincidence in politics. I think the reality that $100 billion is going to be transferred, sanctions are going to be lifted, I think that opened the door. And certainly these individuals are the beneficiaries of that, and we're grateful for that. But no question that Iran is a different country today because of the enormous financial capacity it has. It's only a $400 billion GDP, and so this is enormous infusion. And it's, of course, a concern to me. I'm vice chair of our Financial Services Task Force on Terrorism Financing, and tracking the money is important. And the combination, as General Campbell said, of terrorist and financing is a dangerous combination. So tracking this money is going to be the key. And there's 46 banks in Iran that will have access, about half of them, to transfer money out. We have to wait and see what happens with that. But certainly I think without the transfer of the money, without the lifting of sanctions, I don't think we would have seen the events that occurred.
Jennifer Sedan, Stars and Stripes. And you may have said this in your remarks earlier, but have you actually gotten a chance to meet with the former detainees? Will we get a chance to meet with them?
I have not yet. I don't think any of us have yet. I had, on my way here, a brief telephone conversation. Sarah Hekmati was on the phone with her brother. I had never spoken to him. I never met the young man, even though I feel like I've been associated with him for so many years and feel like a part of his extended family. But just that brief conversation with him was pretty gratifying. A pretty amazing moment for me and for everybody back home who rallied to the cause. You know, I carry with